Hi everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the NSL's podcast. I hope all who's listening is keeping well. Delighted to be joined by my co-host John. How are you, John?
Yeah, not too bad, Stephen. Mate, yourself?
I'm fine, man. Thanks for asking. And a show regular, Francis. How are you, Francis?
Yeah, I'm good. Good. Stephen, yourself?
Same with John there. Doesn't pick me who at the minute. And we also have a special guest. We're delighted to have her back from a Celtic state of mind, Laura Bradburn. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me back on. Hopefully I don't embarrass myself as much this time as I did last time, but we'll wait and see.
No embarrassment. I mean, it's all what we like doing, isn't it? We podcast having a chat about Celtic. So since the season ended, we've basically had a week and a couple of days to reflect on what's been a disastrous season, Laura. And for me this week, it's just been a roller coaster of emotions for me. I'm angry one minute, and then next minute I'm just like, I couldn't give two fucks.
Yeah.
Excuse my friends, but it's like you're waking up every day expecting something different, expecting an announcement, and you're just getting the same old. But we've had a week to reflect. Laura, how are you feeling?
To be honest, it's one of the things where at this point I thought, everybody, the chat was all about can't wait to get the season over, can't wait to be rid of it, can't wait for it to be done. But I think most of that chat was based on the fact that we thought there was going to be some movement by this time after it had finished, that there was going to be maybe an announcement really close after the season finished, or that we'd already be seeing the wheels in motion, even if it's not in the form of an announcement, some more like proactive movement from Dominic Mackay. And I think the fact that none of that has been forthcoming so far has just made me even more like kind of lukewarm to what's going on. It's like you say, you go from being annoyed and being angry at the situation to just kind of being indifferent, and I think that's a feeling that's kind of reflecting the whole Celtic support. We're just kind of over it all until we hear something we want to hear.
Yeah, it's one of them situations where, as you said, we wanted the season to be over because as soon as that was over, we expected an announcement within a couple of days, and the more this goes on, and it's like a saga now, isn't it? The Eddie Howe boss, and when's it coming? When's it going to be in? And I don't know about yourself, John. I'm with Laura here. It's like all these feelings, and just to get nothing again for the last week or couple of days, and it's a bit deflating from my point of view, because you think after the season we had, the Celtic board, as much as for me personally, I don't trust them to do right by Celtic, but you would expect something coming out at least in terms of movement, management structures, director of football.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I echo what both you and Laura are saying there. It's like you say, it's a roller coaster of emotions. It's obviously been a season to forget, and you want to just get things moving so we can look forward, but it's difficult to do that when you're not getting anything coming for the club at all. So I think it's until something is officially announced, I'm in the boat where I'm not going to. I'll be excited once I know those wheels are in motion, so to speak. I mean, they've just recently announced the dates for the draw for the Champions League qualifiers, and we're still no further forward, and it just lets you know how limited the time's getting and how quickly we need to get things moving. But hopefully, with Bournemouth season and all that being over, if all these reports are true about Eddie's contract obligations and stuff like that are done, then it seems to be widely expected that he might be announced some point this week. So it's something, again, as I said, you're up and down, and it's just another thing to kind of look forward to, but at the same time you're kind of just sitting impatiently waiting, I suppose. Yeah,
I mean, I put up the Twitter post today and Instagram about Eddie Howe set to be announced this week. Your man Keith Jackson from the Daily Record, and underneath it, just put, "We've heard this all before." Just, so I mean, it's that type of situation now, Francis, where you're kind of regurgitating the same stuff. And John, you said there you'd be excited, and yes, as a fan base, we would be excited and engrossed in Eddie Howe. But at the same time, Francis, it's not a bit of a do you know what I mean? Like I said this before, but like an anti-climax. For longer this goes on, and we're expected to be Eddie Howe, when it gets announced, it's like, it's done now, because all the excitement's built up over the months and there's been nothing yet from Celtic Football Club.
I think a lot it'll be relief and stuff, just because we know finally we've got a decision's been made. Because like I'm similar to Lord, but I just can't be bothered anymore with some of the stuff, because I'm just like I can't accept that I'm not going to hear anything. I'm going to have to be patient. I feel like it's just I don't know, man. It's to reflect on the season. It's just, and the Eddie Howe situation. Yeah, it's just we've come to expect it now. We're getting nothing, and you get wee snippets here and there. Maybe just something getting released to the press. It gets you a wee bit excited for a couple of days, and 2 weeks later, it's went quiet again. Really. So it's just I'm neither up nor down with it, to be honest.
It's, as you said, the relief side of things. It's a bit like it should be excitement. It should be you're ecstatic. You're wanting to buy your season book. Eddie Howe's going to bring all these players in. There's going to be a new style, Laura, and we discussed it off air a bit, and we said how we felt. It's like it's almost like as well. The longer this goes on, it feels like to me the board are just waiting as long as they can. And what worries me the most, what if it goes pear-shaped and Eddie Howe just says no? Because we've seen the recent events in regards to Peter Lawwell's house, which laid in the Celts condemned to the highest degree. But we're never going to stop calling out the board and their shortfalls and the things they're not doing for the fans, like added value and things like that. So is that something that worries you, especially how long this has dragged on for, Laura?
Yeah, just before I answer that, but yeah, just to echo what you've said there about the Peter Lawwell situation. We don't know obviously if it was related to football or not, but certainly from like a content creation point of view, nothing that we say in criticism of the clubs, either here or over at Celtic State of Mind, where I'm based, nothing should result in that kind of situation happening. And hopefully him and his family are all right. But yeah, as far as the Eddie Howe situation is concerned, I am conflicted because on one hand I don't want him to slip through our fingers because I rate him really highly as a manager. I think he's got some brilliant ideas. I think certainly he would coach players to a much higher standard than they have been coached over the last 18 months. But on the other hand, there's a bit of me that I had a tweet sitting in my drafts today that I thought better of sending out, but it got to the point where I was just like, do we actually want a guy who seems to be going so back and forth, if rumours are to be believed, about coming to the club, that he's so unsure? Do we want somebody like that in charge? Because I want somebody who's ecstatic to come to Celtic rather than somebody who's almost appears to be using it as a bargaining chip of some kind. The other way you look at it as well, of course, is it's maybe an admirable quality that he's obviously got standards he wants to keep, and if the board don't meet them, then he doesn't want to come because he can't do the job he wants to do anyway. So it's a difficult one. Obviously the outcome I want is for him to be manager, but if he doesn't, then we'll just have to look elsewhere. I think, like, you raise a good point though. Like, we're at the point now where if it isn't Eddie Howe, then what's going to happen? Because I haven't even heard another name in the frame for weeks or months now, so you're kind of back to square one if it doesn't end up being him.
I think you're right in making the point in terms of, is he using Celtic as a bargaining tip? I used that phrase before in this podcast, and quite rightly at the time people were saying we don't know that, but the way I'm looking at it now, you see the Wolves job coming up. You see Crystal Palace, Roy Hodgson leaving, the Wolves managers have said, Tottenham, to a lesser degree, maybe he's not going to attract the likes of Tottenham to his name yet. But is that not a worry, John? I mean, you're a big Eddie Howe fan. You've made that pretty clear in the podcast. You expected to be him. But at the end of the day, if you look at Wolves, and to put it in perspective, their transfer budget would dwarf Celtic's. Their playing staff, their wages. Do you know what I mean? They're not a bigger club than Celtic, but it's the finances down in England. If Eddie Howe is holding out for something like that, surely that points to the Celtic anyway. This is, I don't want to sound negative, but is it right that he's looking at other moves? I mean, we don't know that, but if he is it right he's doing that to weigh up his options for the correct choice, or should he just commit to Celtic and show that he wants to come to Celtic at this moment anyway?
I mean, it's a valid point. Absolutely. I think any manager who the draw of the English Premier League is going to appeal to anybody, especially when you look at the finances involved. But you're right in saying that they're not a bigger club, and at the likes of Crystal Palace and Wolves and that, you're never going to be you're a mid-table side at best. And is that something you want to is that where you want your career to go? Or, like you say, do you look at...
Just looking back to you, sorry, John. Wolves finished 7th in consecutive seasons in the Premier League, and they do have aspirations, I believe, from the ownership to be a big club and a big six club. So what if that attracts them? Do you know what I mean? This is what I'm trying to say.
Well, like I say, I mean, it's a chance you take, right? So, like you say, the money involved is obviously certainly a drawing point, but in terms of project, which is something that he's mentioned before, he's extremely interested in. I think Celtic's a far better project. He's getting to test himself in Europe. He's an opportunity to win silverware, and we've seen through, and we've touched on this previously as well. I don't think any of us as Celtic fans like the idea or notion of us being a stepping stone to any club, but I think being realistic with the current climate and with the finances and the Scottish game and everything like that, I think it's not unrealistic to say that that is just kind of we need to sort of to an extent accept that that's where we are, whether we like it or not. But for the likes of Howe, he's got an opportunity to come to a great club, massive club, great history, and cement his own legacy here. So I think that should be a drawn point in its own right. I just want to touch on though, like I say, it's like, I mean, for me personally, and sorry, it's different for me saying this as a Celtic fan, but none of the like, I mean, and with all respect to some of these English clubs, there's no passion in the English game either. I don't think it. I mean, other than the money, the transfer budget that's available to you, there's nothing in England at these kind of clubs that is a serious pulling, that has much pulling power, and I just don't get why a guy would be like, I'm just going to hold off and see. But at the end of the day, if the Celtic board are sort of twiddling their thumbs and they're the ones that are holding out, then Eddie's well within his right to have a chat with any other clubs that come forward and show an interest. That's our fault, and that would be down to the Celtic board's lack of action. But as I said previously many times, I firmly believe that Eddie does want the Celtic job. I think that there is, as it's been widely reported, I believe that there is contractual obligations. I've read numerous things. I've looked at, as I've mentioned before as well, just when you look at the sort of the Bournemouth fans and their fan forums, it looks a lot like Eddie, when he stepped down, still had a year to run in his contract, and I think that Bournemouth were, as a gesture of goodwill, so to speak, for everything he's done for the club, decided to see his contract out, still pay him in that respect, and because there's contractual obligations on Eddie's side as well as some of the guys he wants to bring in, that's why there's been a delay. And if that is the case, then I guess we need to cut the board some slack in that respect. I still think that they could have done a lot more in terms of giving us a little bit of something. Just say we've got our guy, but we can't announce it yet, or whatever the case may be. But the sooner we get it done and get it out of the line, the better I think we'll all feel. And like you say, until it's actually signed and it's on the dotted line and he's unveiled and he's holding that scarf above his head, anything can happen.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right when you say that we all just want something announced. And Francis, I'm going to put you on the spot here a wee bit, like I like to do sometimes, right? I want you to put your Eddie Howe hat on. I want you to be him for a second here, right? Mm-hmm. And you're down in England, and in the back of your mind, you know you've went to Burnley. It's not went quite well. You've had family issues and problems, and you see the likes of Wolves, Tottenham. Who's the other club I mentioned? Wolves, Tottenham,
Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace, yes. Them jobs become available. Maybe his agent's trying to tout him to stay in England, and then Celtic have contacted him. Apparently, he's had 3 meetings, if we're led to believe, with Lowell and Mackay and Desmond. But if you're in Eddie Howe's mind right now, what do you think he would be feeling? Do you think it would be like an enormous amount of pressure to commit? Because as we've seen there, and Laura rightly said, the scenes we've seen at Lowell's house, we don't know if it's connected to football, but is that something that he would particularly want to uproot his young family to come to this goldfish bowl in Glasgow?
Well, first of all, like the Lowell situation, that's got nothing to do with football. That's just an absolute moron, or morons just being absolute.
So you don't think it was anything to do with Celtic fans or anything?
I think the football team, football's irrelevant in that situation. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a Celtic fan or a Rangers fan. It'll come out what team this person or persons support. I think it's irrelevant in the context of things. I don't think football should be brought in. The football team should be. It was attempted murder at the end of the day. When you think about it, you set a fire, you don't know how that's going to go. So I didn't like the football narrative brought into the Peter Lawwell attacks, because I think it's irrelevant to talk about, to bring football into it. But to go on to Eddie Howe, what would I be thinking as Eddie Howe? I hate to say it, but I think the Wolves job would be appealing, because they do spend a wee bit of money. They bring good players in. They are a decent team. Granted, they may lose some of the players, but they work with, I think it's Mina Raiola, the agent they work with. Yeah. What agent they work with, but they seem to have a good connection with him. I don't think he would get near the Tottenham job. I don't see them going from Jose Mourinho to Eddie Howe, in the greatest respect to Eddie Howe. I think Tottenham are maybe above that now. Maybe if he came up to like a Celtic, he could get a Tottenham job, like do something similar to Brendan Rodgers. But yeah, if I'm Eddie Howe, the only job down south that would really interest me is the Wolves job, really. Because as I say, I don't think he's at the level of Spurs job. Crystal Palace, they just they just make up the numbers in the league. Really, you could argue Wolves have a wee go, but yeah, I would like to think he would show a wee bit of ambition and come to Celtic. It's a big project and stuff. It's a massive club, but I appreciate that he, as an Englishman from Bournemouth, I believe it's Celtic, hasn't got the same appeal to him as it has to us. So you've got to try and be a wee bit open-minded. Unfortunately, that some of these folk, that Celtic doesn't mean everything to them at the end of the day. So with the money involved to him personally as well, it might interest him to stay down south and stay close at home. But I hope I'm miles off the mark there. I believe him, or I think it is just a matter of when. And like when John touched on, I think it is a contractual issue, and football contracts run out on the 31st of May usually. So I think we're just going to have to wait now, unfortunately. We'll keep waiting.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct, man. I think, as you said, the Wolves job out of them all will be appealing. But Laura, coming to yourself before we move on to the next subject. So when Celtic announced Jack Ross as manager, how were you feeling? We joking. So, as Francis rightly alluded to there, is there anything worrying you? As you said, he could be using Celtic as a bargaining chip, his agents touting the other teams, other clubs, etc. And this is obviously speculations from us, but is that something that worries you genuinely, that he could be his head turned? He might be already kind of down the line with Celtic, maybe not signed anything yet, a verbal agreement we're led to believe, I don't know, but is that something that worries you?
Well, listen, in a more general sense, I don't really have an issue with using Celtic as a stepping stone of kinds, because like I think there's other clubs that are on a level with us size wise, or even maybe a bit bigger, like Ajax and things like that, where Dortmund are another one where, you know, they're seen as a good option for young players to go, or managers on the up in their career, to build a profile, have success with, and move on to bigger and better things. I don't have a problem with Celtic operating that way going forward, because I think it's done no harm to those other clubs that I've mentioned, and they're still able to maintain a sort of high profile. But there's a difference between doing that, between Eddie Howe, say, coming and building his profile back up and bringing success to Celtic, and then getting a job back down south or something like that in 2-3 years' time. There's a difference between that and actually just using as a bargaining chip for negotiations for a contract at another club. They're one I agree with, one I don't agree with, and I think that's where the distinction lies. I don't have a problem with them coming and even saying behind closed doors, listen, I'm here to build my profile back up, I'll bring you as much success as I can in the meantime, but I want to go back down south or something. That's fine. What we have to make sure and do is that we don't get him, have the opportunity to have that success under him, and then let it all fall away the way we did under Rodgers. I think Rodgers had put in place a lot of sort of ethics and a lot of professional standards and stuff like that should have remained after he left and didn't. And so if Eddie Howe comes in and the same thing happens again, you'll have to ask serious questions of the club at large, because then that's to do with the way the whole club is run rather than any individual, because an individual come in and have an impact, but if it's going to last, it's got to be because the infrastructure's there to make it last in the future.
Well, that's true. That brings us on to the next point in terms of his backroom team and who he wants to bring with him and stuff, because we've seen rumours that he wants to bring the likes of Mark Burchill, he wants to appoint Richard Hughes as director of football, and the coaches Stephen Purchase and Simon Weatherstone. John, I've seen a lot of Celtic fans, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, or any other social media platform, there is a split, because I'm kind of with the side here that he shouldn't be able to appoint his boss on top of him, like the director of football, like Richard Hughes. Now, I don't know your thinking behind this. My rationale for it is because you need someone to call out Eddie Howe if something's going wrong, rather than, we've seen it before, the old Friends Act. It sounds like, I don't think, for me, that's the way we need to go down. If we're getting Eddie Howe in, Fergal Harkin, maybe he has links with Dermot Desmond, but again, he's going to be a guy coming in, experience in Manchester City. That rumour's kind of, I don't know, went away, but Richard Hughes is starting to come up again. What's your opinion? As Laura rightly said, the structure needs to be in place for these guys to do their best, but if the director of football, do you think it should be someone Eddie Howe should pick, or an outsider coming in?
I just want, I mean, by all accounts, if Eddie's going to be the manager, right, then I firmly believe he should have full autonomy over the staff he's working with, and that includes director of football. you say, or you refer to director of football as his boss. I don't see it like that, right? The manager's a manager, and in all football related matters, he should have the final say, right? The director of football for me is somebody who, and we had this chat with David Webb, if you remember, when we had him on, and he outlined what that role was. And he never at one point or at any point during that mentioned that he's boss, or he works over somebody, or he gets the final say. They all work as a collective, and you have to ensure that if you have a director of football in place, that the manager and that director of football have the best working relationship possible. Because if you have a situation where they don't get along, then right off the bat everything's just going to fall to bits. So and as we've seen when Law was acting as a de facto director of football, which wasn't his role, he undercut Rodgers, he undercut Lennon a lot of decisions. Players were being signed without the manager's knowledge, and that's the kind of thing that you risk if you've got somebody who is working directly for the board and no for the manager. So in my opinion, if Eddie wants a particular person in to work as his director of football, then give him. Absolutely.
I get where you're coming from, but it brings me back to the structure side of thing, Francis. As Laura said, and she's right when she says this, you need the structure in place for these guys to thrive. And what's to say if Eddie Howe decides to pack it in or leave for another club in 2 or 3 years' time? I mean, we'll have to be honest here. The usual longevity of a manager now is maybe 3 to 4 years at maximum. I know he stayed at Bournemouth for basically the whole of his managerial career, but I'm sure he has other aspirations as well. But if he brings Richard Hughes with him, Francis, if he leaves, right, the backroom staff are going with him, and probably Richard Hughes as well. So does that not leave Celtic back in that position again, where they're trying to rebuild the whole thing again after 4 years?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Stephen. And I said it on a previous podcast that I don't, when it comes to the director of football, I don't think Eddie Howe should be picking him or the new manager should be picking him. But I also understand why he would, and just to simply as a working relationship, he knows it'll work. There's no guarantee it'll work, but it's worked in the past, so to speak. But yeah, I do agree that obviously going forward, it's maybe not ideal because, like you say, when the new manager leaves, he's likely to take his backroom staff with him. That's kind of the nature of the beast, if you like. And then, but if he takes the director of football, but who knows if your man Richard Hughes is coming in as director of football, because I believe that he was like in the scouting setup, like the recruitment side in Bournemouth. If he comes in, he may be taking up that role at Celtic. We don't really know it. I mean, I think it's widely led to believe that it will be a director of football role or something similar, but it may be sort of ahead of the recruitment he comes in as, and you just don't know.
Again, it's all ifs and buts. But Laura, what's your thinking behind this? Because I think it's vital that the structure remains in place for many years. If we're doing this rebuild now, it needs to stay and needs to be fresh. But if Eddie Howe's appointing, I'm going to say it again, as boss, because the director of football role can be many things. It can be the guy who's in charge of recruitment. It can be the guy who oversees all the football departments. We just don't know. There's many different roles within the director of football, and David Webb's just one of them guys who we spoke to and gave us his role previously. But again, other guys may have different roles. But what's your opinion on the whole thing? And does it leave space again for the likes of John Kennedy to be in the backroom staff? Because I'm led to believe he only wants 2 coaches with him, Stephen Purchases and Simon Weatherstone. Where's your thinking behind this, Laura?
Well, on the John Kennedy thing, I've said previously on other platforms, I don't know exactly how many more chances we can give John Kennedy to prove his worth, because he's been part of the successful teams as well as the teams that haven't done so well. So that suggests to me something more than, probably even worse than, a negative impact. He's having 0 impact as far as I can tell, and you can only hear so many times that he speaks well about football and he's highly rated and this, that and the next thing. So as far as John Kennedy's future at the club is, I'm not sure. But for Eddie Howe, I don't know. I don't understand fully how the director of football role works, but like, I'm the same as you guys were saying, that I don't think, I wouldn't class the director of football as the manager's boss. You know, I would class Dominic Mackay as the manager's boss, and so if a director of football is going to be working closely with him, then surely he should have a hand in saying who that is, and hopefully that can flourish. The only problem that leaves you with is, if Eddie Howe goes, you're your director of football might go, and so might all your coaching staff, and you're left back at square one. So from that point of view, what I would like to see them do is, even if he does have a hand in appointing these coaches and his director of football, and they end up going with him, even if they can all work together to implement a culture at the club that remains after they go, or even something that, the coaching staff that are managing the Colts, who I'm sure will be much more ingratiated members of staff within the club that will remain even after he was to go away. If he can influence those types of staff members long after he goes, then that's only something that can help for the future.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Brendan Rodgers leaving the tools behind and not getting wrecked within 18 months, and it's almost like Celtic are their own worst enemies. I mean, the lack of forward planning is shocking. My big issue with it is with Eddie Howe anyway. It's like, yes, this took so long, but again, there's been no clarification for both camps, which is leading people to believe that this is going to happen. This is it. He's going to be coming in. And the director of football role for me should be someone who's impartial. Now, this isn't me like saying Fergal Harkin, because we all know he's Irish and has links with Desmond. And we heard before that there's links of the Juventus chief scout and all linked with the director of football role. I personally think it should be someone impartial. Eddie Howe gets the full autonomy of his backroom team, fair enough. And Dominic Mackay should oversee that, as you rightly said, Laura. But John, if you look at, we've talked about this so many times, Celtic need to also plan for Eddie Howe, but they need to plan for when Eddie Howe leaves. There needs to be at least a 5-year plan more to get Celtic back to where they were, because no joke, all joking aside here, the rebuild Celtic are facing, look, you said there the dates were introduced for the Champions League. It's madness, because we've basically got a skeleton team. The likes of Ayer's been linked with Newcastle. Edwards being linked away, and Christie hopefully goes. And you're looking at it from my point of view anyway. It's massive, massive job. And what are we expecting of Eddie Howe if he comes in? Miracles? Because taking the Celtic glasses off, I can't see it being all success within the first season. Yes, I can see us maybe winning the league and a cup or whatever, but the trebles and stuff, that'll take a few more years, certainly in my point of view.
It's difficult to say, Stephen, in all honesty. I mean, I said this previously, and I think it was maybe taken out of context. I fully appreciate and understand the job at hand, and the rebuild and the task in itself. We know you're not just going to come in and then right off the bat have another Rodgers-esque sort of season. That's not to say he's maybe not capable. It depends again on whether he can come in, if he can implement, like Laura was saying, that you implement a particular culture and you can get these guys playing for you and playing your way, and getting a style in place, and getting everybody to buy into it. If you can get that in and you get the right players in, then you can definitely have a successful season. But I mean, I think he definitely deserves a chance to make that happen, because it doesn't happen overnight. With that being said, I feel that, like you mentioned, that having a plan in place is certainly something that should happen. If a board was, or if a club at large is being run properly, you're going to have, or you should at least, in my opinion, have something to fall back on in the event that, let's say, a year or two down the line, Eddie is tempted away with a higher profile job or whatever the case may be, that you've got things in place or a plan in place, which we seem to have been lacking since Rodgers left, which I think has been a serious issue, and that ultimately, yeah, I think absolutely the board and the club need to make sure that they've got something to fall back on, and not just assume that he's going to be there for, let's say he signs a 5-year deal, right? He's not just going to see it out and then just not have anything in place to fall back on if he doesn't see that contract out, because as we've seen when Rodgers left, a lot of fans were up in arms. They went to Neil Lennon, appointed him in the showers, as it's been widely reported as well. So I mean that's the sign of a club who were kind of panicked and just took the quick option, or even possibly even cheap option. I don't know the details of the finances, but it just seemed rushed. And I mean, even now, with Lennon having left months ago, us knowing that the season was ultimately over in the new year, it just seems that there's been no sort of plan to fall back on. There's been nothing to show that there's any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? They haven't been proactive in any way, shape, or form for me, and I feel that it makes us look amateurish, if I'm being honest, and it's for a club like Celtic, it's ridiculous that we're even in this position in the first place. Like I says, something should have been in place. So, in the event that Rodgers left, which we all seen coming, I think there was no secret that he wasn't happy with the way things were going. When you're hearing things about players being signed, he's no idea about who these players are, but they've been signed. When you're hearing that you're going behind this guy's back, it's like there's a lot of stuff that is going on behind the scenes, and you'd expect a club like Celtic, or the club the size of Celtic, or any institution in football, to have a plan B and something to fall back on, and we just don't seem like we've got anything like that at all. So going forward, that needs to be something that we definitely implement.
I think that's a big job for Dominic Mackay to basically control that from boardroom level. But Laura, I've asked the folks on our podcast this previously, and it got a bit heated. People were saying their points of view, and then people were chirping back and stuff. But what would be your expectations of next season? What would you want to happen? We've seen the Champions League qualifier date's been put out there, and apparently Celtic might be seeded for the second and third qualifying round, depending on how things go. But are you expecting us to be in a group stage of European competition? Are you expecting the league back at Celtic Park? Where are you standing?
I think from a financial point of view, if we weren't already starting to see signs of the pandemic having an impact and other things, the fact that we've missed out in the Champions League for as many years as we have, I think getting into the group stage of the Champions League from a purely financial point of view is something that we need to try and prioritise, or at the very least a run beyond Christmas in the Europa League, because I think regardless of whether you think we can do anything of note in those competitions, from a really unromantic and purely financial point of view, we need to make sure that we're there with some regularity over the next couple of years, because you can't go without 10 or 20 million or whatever it is that it brings in every season. You can't keep going without that and expect to continue at the level that we have done over the last decade. From a domestic point of view, I think there's no reason to suggest that we can't just get back on parity with Rangers or outstrip them, because I think what's happened is our season has been uncharacteristically bad, and theirs has been uncharacteristically good, and that's combined to make this gap between us that is probably not as big as it appears. I'll be interested to see what happens from their side, because as much as I don't think Steven Gerrard is quite the manager that he's made out to be, I definitely think he's done enough to warrant interest from down south, and it'll be interesting to see what happens over the summer from his point of view, whether they can hold on to him. But whether they can or not, I still think we can get back level with them and hopefully, make much more of a challenge for the league title next season than we did this one.
Yeah, I think one team that's been excellent this season has St Johnstone. I think we'll have to give them a mention, a cup double. Unexpected from every angle in the Scottish Premier League anyway. But coming to yourself, Francis, before we move on, the expectation for next season is different for every Celtic fan, and that's understandable. There's people who believe maybe they can't challenge. Others people who think, yes, we need to be back on top. Like Anthony, for example, wants the challenge in all fronts, the guy from our podcast. But as this drags on, Francis, where are you standing? Because again, it's 6 or so weeks to the first game. We're no further on with anything really, signing targets, anything coming in. There's been no talk of that. Are you still confident that Celtic can win the league next season?
Yeah, I'm confident. And then, I feel it'll be easier to sort of please me than you, Stephen, because I'm sure about 5 minutes ago you said it might win a league or cup double. But
yes,
that's not like the success of winning trebles and that. Like, trebles are just a thing you do.
No. What I meant was, right, so I'm coming from the purely aspect of, we've seen a team in the country winning one league and celebrating it like it's the best thing.
No, I agree. But I'm saying you're above that level.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So that's why I'm expecting maybe a league and a cup. And
it was the way you said it. You just batted it off like it was nothing.
No. I'm saying trebles for me. The challenge for that, it will be hard because we need the squad in place. We've seen the squad we had, and we had Rodgers and stuff, and Neil Lennon when he first came back. That was excellent. It was an excellent team. We've lost basically most of that team, so it's a big rebuild. This is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, Yeah, yes and no, because you look at Rodgers and we're led to believe that was a big rebuild coming in for that, or a rebuild of sorts. And he brought in some decent players like your Sinclairs, your Moussa Dembele's, but he made guys a lot better. And there could be guys like your Ayers could stay, your Christies could stay. Like, it could just tweak it with get a few guys in, then make these players better. The guys that are there, make them better.
Just to come back into there, Francis, I have to disagree with you there because it's nothing like when Rodgers came in from my point of view.
For your point of view, it's nothing. For your point of view, it's nothing like that.
But Ronnie Delia won 2 leagues. He had good players. So I mean,
the majority of this team won the league last season. Won a treble last season. The majority of this team, and we're led to believe like we can only say for sure that Edward will be away for this team. There's nobody you can actually say definitely has got to go away. We believe there'll be a few boys, but you can only really say Edward's got to go. So, and I appreciate Edward's a massive player, but the rebuild might not be as big as we're led to believe it is. I think it will be a big rebuild, but again, it depends on if it is Eddie Howe. Some guys could be tempted to stay because of him because he is a well-respected manager.
I think the majority of your loan players will be gone. So you could be saying goodbye to Elyounoussi. He's probably the only one who's had any significant impact. But the rest will be away as well.
And Duffy, but I just think it could have an impact similar to Rodgers in the sense that it will make players better. And like I say, like Callum McGregor's had a serious drop in form. Christie's had a serious drop in form. These boys aren't bad players. They aren't bad players, and they might have a future. Well, I believe Callum McGregor will still have a future at Celtic, but Christie possibly still has a future at Celtic.
No, I firmly agree with you there, Francis, because, like you say, it wasn't that it wasn't that we had necessarily a bad team under Ronnie, right? But you'd be kidding yourself if you're saying that Rodgers didn't come in and improve them further, the guys that were already there, in addition to bringing the guys in. And when it comes to somebody like Eddie Howe, he's a well-respected manager, as Franny said, and he's got a reputation of being a good manager and developing players as well. You just need to look at when he took over the Bournemouth job originally at such a young age. This was a club that was on the brink of being extinct, completely gone through liquidation. They had a transfer ban in place. He wasn't in a position to sign players. They never had money. Not only did he save them despite a points deficit for relegation, he then improved that team and got them promoted. So that's somebody who's came in, taken over a club in the worst possible position they could be in. Players who's probably thought their careers were done, that they wouldn't have a job at the end of a season, and lifted everybody in that club, got them playing for each other, got them playing together, and then absolutely worked miracles at Bournemouth. So I've no doubts that guys like Ayer, Christie, even McGregor, Forrest, and that, he can bring out the best in these boys if we can have a chat with them and get them to stay. Then it'll certainly make the rebuild a little easier, because, as you say, we don't know who is going to be coming and going, but I think it is a fantastic appointment in that sense, because you could have a guy coming in and then lifting everybody's spirits again, lifting everybody's heads and getting them playing football the way we know they're capable of playing. So,
Laura, what's your opinion on this? I mean, to be fair to John and Francis, they do bring up good points, but just to backfire it to yourself, Laura, I don't know from your point of view, but for me personally, it leaves a bitter taste in my mouth to be thinking that these players can be brought on again to the levels that they reached before, because we've seen them this season, and to be quite frank, most of them for me down tools, and it was a team of individuals. It was a team of people who couldn't care less about the outcomes of games. We've seen at the end of games when they were losing, the pathetic reaction. There were some players laughing and joking. That's not what a Celtic player for me should be doing, especially in front of TV cameras. What's your opinion what the guys are saying, Laura, about maybe players that could be reinvented under a new management team?
Well, I mean, that is one way of looking at it, that they down tools, and you know, you would want to see them leave the club because you're not interested in seeing anything more from them if that's what they're willing to do. The other way of looking at it is and admitting that they had no game plan and he didn't really know what his role was.
Sorry, Laura, there seems to be a wee bit of an issue with your mic. I don't know if you guys can hear Laura, can you?
Not anymore, no. It was cutting off.
Dropped out the call there.
Sorry.
You back in now, yeah?
Yeah, all good. I don't know what happened there. I just get cut off, but I'll start again.
No worries.
I think that is one way of looking at it, that, you could be kind of sickened by the way they've played this season and say you sort of good riddance type of thing. But the other way of looking at it for me is that potentially they've just not been getting managed properly last season by Neil Lennon. I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah.
That with good coaching they could become the players they were before again, because they're getting the right kind of direction. Callum McGregor was quite clear that he hadn't had any kind of, or he went into various games. One of the defeats against Livingston, I think he said that he wasn't really sure what the game plan was or anything like that. So I'm more on John and Francis' side of, like, I think there are good players in some of those players and they can be coached back to what they are. Whether they down tools or not, I think is possible, but I think there was just a very toxic atmosphere in the club at the time, and that probably didn't help things.
I firmly agree with that, Laura, and I've said that previously as well. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, right? We can only, on the outside looking in, it's all right to come up with your own wee theories and make assumptions and stuff like that. But like you mentioned there, that's a perfect way of describing it. It seems like there's a toxic atmosphere within Celtic at the minute, or at least there was. Players' heads naturally would drop in that circumstance, and I feel like we shouldn't be so hard on the players for down in tools, because we don't know the full ins and outs of why that's potentially happened.
I would disagree with that. You've got to hear a wee bit of an issue with players if they're down tools, John. You can't just say got to get off their back. But I just the nature of the beast in football, it's.
But to turn and say
you can't just say
I don't want any
just get
of
rid
them
of
in the
every
club
player. No, that's what I
down
mean.
tools.
I mean, in an ideal situation, you would get rid of them all and get you guys in, but financially, you just can't do that, can you? Just can't do that financially. It's just the way football works, I suppose.
I know. I'm definitely.
It's not a nice side of football, but it's what goes on at the end of the day.
I'm definitely not saying you'll see various streams that I've been on over the season where I've been like, Tom Rodgers should never play in a Celtic shirt again, or Lee Griffiths, or Ryan Christie, or whoever you want to name. I think I've had to go at every player in the team at some point.
Same.
But I think there's got to be an appreciation that, like, if a manager comes in and gets the best out of Callum McGregor again, or if he gets the best out of Barkas that we've yet to see, or whatever, I would rather have that happen than just ship them out in anger, because we don't know what would be round the corner if we did that, I don't think.
Yeah, totally.
Barkas is a lost cause, though.
Nah, I mean, Stephen and Barkas' cap. We're in his cap.
Barkas, for me, he has a future of Celtic. I think Laura rightly pointed out, we don't know what style of Lenny's coaching was, and Barkas had a relatively decent career up until he joined Celtic. He was playing in the Champions League, #1 for Greece, playing.
We need to sit and go through players who had relatively good careers before they came to Celtic.
John.
Neil, every one of your summer signings had a good career until they came to Celtic.
Aye, that was a great summer window, remember?
Right. I don't want to get in the Barkas conversation because John's like a Rottweiler. He'd be like, "Rrr." But right.
Just as well.
No, I'm just saying though, it's like, I mean, some people just can't adapt to the Scottish game, the pace, and some people just can't settle. I mean, we've seen it with Al Hamid. Al Hamid looked like a great player. He had a good career up until he joined us. He couldn't settle. Didn't mean he was bad. He just he wasn't for the club. And I think Barkas is a similar sort of vein.
Yeah, you're also talking about what we forget about relatively young guys, some of whom, Barkas especially, was being asked to come and live in a foreign country during a pandemic, like when everybody was struggling, never mind a guy who couldn't even socialise with his teammates or see his family or travel home between games or anything like that. Like, all of that was taken away from him. He was probably going to training, going to games and going back and sitting in a hotel, and that's not going to be good for anybody. I don't care what anybody says.
Nah, I totally agree. I touched on that before on the podcast.
That sounds like a week in Francis' life and all them hotels he stays in. No, we joke. But you look at it as well. Like, one thing that hasn't actually stopped is the rumour mill in terms of transfers and things. And I put up the tweet about Oliver Neesham, basically his contract being terminated. It's not been confirmed, but I've seen a few other respected journalists tweeted as well, and a couple of news outlets, and it kind of blew up. I mean, I woke up the morning after, and there was French newspapers and all quoting it and stuff and saying it was from us. But coming to yourself, Laura, we've seen the likes of Neesham basically saying his contract's being terminated. We've seen the likes of Turnbull being linked with moves away, Ayer, and another weird one. Celtic had a bid rejected for a striker, Aaron Bendeza. What? Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Put it up on on the Twitter account. But who do you think's making these dealings, Laura? Who could it be?
I mean, I struggle because there's Liam Shaw as well, isn't there? That it was signed
Liam Shaw,
a couple of months ago or something like that from Sheffield Wednesday. He might fall more under the remit of a kind of youth development type of contract, so maybe he's slightly different. But I'm struggling to understand where all that's coming from. To talk about the Ncham thing specifically, I think if that's true, and although it's not been confirmed, but if it's true, it would be a shocking decision for a couple of reasons. One, obviously, as a lot of people have pointed out, this is a guy who we rejected a £15 million bid for a couple of years ago, supposedly. So to let him go for nothing would be shocking. But also from a financial point of view, I would presume if you're going to cut his contract short, you're going to have to pay him the full remainder of his contract. So financially that makes no sense when you've still got 2 windows to go where you could hopefully bump him off for a little bit of money or at least cover your costs that way. So if that's the kind of decision making that turns out to have been made at the club, then we're headed for rocky shores, because one thing you can say about Peter Lawwell, you can criticise him for a lot of things, and we all have done throughout this season, but one thing you can't complain about is his financial management, and his ability to balance the spreadsheet at the club and keep us in a much better financial state than some other clubs we could mention. So I think to keep him or to see that kind of decision made knowing that Peter Lawwell's headed for the door doesn't fill me with great optimism, I have to say.
Well, when I put that Ncham post up, it literally exploded, Laura, within like 10, 15 minutes. There's all sorts of comments, likes and retweets, and it is a bit divided, to be honest. There's people saying, Francis, if he was one of the troublemakers, get him out the door, because we can't have that coming back into the camp in pre-season to kind of put that bad feeling around. But again, Laura brings up a fantastic point. Financially, could we not have got £2 or £3 million for him just to recoup some money? Any money at the moment's good in this climate. And then the bid for the striker we had turned down in the region of apparently 6.5 million. I've heard his name been mentioned before, more recently in the January transfer window. But it seems like Celtic, if it's led to believe, are willing to spend the money. But again, it seems like they're making stupid decisions, letting players like Ncham go for free, if that's true.
Yeah, so and I actually commented on the tweet that you put out saying that even if it makes no financial sense not to even just try and get a couple million for him, like Laura touched on there, it's baffling if true, absolutely baffling. But I hope it's because I believe on his day he's arguably the best midfielder in Scotland. But if he's one of the troublemakers, he probably do want to get rid of me in that sense. But I wouldn't get rid of him by just paying off his contract, I feel like, because like we said, it makes no business sense, and in these times you need to be trying to make some money, and I don't believe Peter Law would make that kind of deal like Laura touched on. But to talk about bids and stuff that we're making, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that the new manager, if there is one in place, I know we keep touching on Eddie Howe, is working behind the scenes and doing these decisions. It'll not be the first time, it'll not be the last time it's made. These things probably happen in football when a new manager is coming in. It's just, obviously, in our situation, nothing's been made official, but there's nothing to suggest that behind the scenes he's not saying, look, I wanted this guy, I want that guy, or whatever. I don't want this guy in the team, I don't want that guy. So it's just, obviously, that's guesswork, but I believe that will happen in football. So I don't think it's unusual that that could be happening. I would find it rather strange if we're bringing in guys or attempting to bring in players and then just saying to the new manager, this is your guy, especially at this time when the season's over. I would find it strange to be bringing in players and then just the manager being lumbered with these players, I feel like, instead of the manager saying, I would like this guy going, well, we're trying to sort out my side of the deal. Here's a couple of boys that I wouldn't mind getting in, and here's a couple of the players I want shipped out, really, that I don't see a future at the club. So I believe behind the scenes, I suppose it's maybe more hope that I want to believe that is what's happening with, hopefully, Eddie Howe, that and between him and Dominic Mackay, that's what's happening behind the scenes, just to try, not maybe to get a head start on next season, but try and prepare best for next season, and now get business done early, and then it's just a matter of, if these boys come in, it's just what happens first. These boys might come in before Eddie Howe or the manager's announced, or vice versa. Just hope it's more hope that I think things are happening in the background with the new guy, if you like.
Yeah. One of the most worrying things for me, and I know it's pure speculation, John, is already we see David Turnbull being linked with clubs down south with a pathetic £7 million bid, John. And you're looking at this going, in this current climate, £7 to £10 million for Turnbull looks a good bit of business, but again, it's a player we need in that team to build that team around, John. And it looks like if it Nisham as well being allowed to go, if it's true, for free, the striker bid. Are you? Well, Francis is thinking this is Eddie Howe working behind the scenes, kind of grafting who he wants in, who he wants out.
I would say so. I mean, if everything that you hear is like to be believed, then I can see certainly that he might be making some decisions. In which case, that's great, because although he's not officially announced, it means that stuff's still getting done behind the scenes. I wouldn't like to think that what I want to know is if it isn't Eddie Howe and that he's not having a say, who is making the decisions then? And I can't see why we would give any sort of control to like say Kennedy when we know he's not going to be the manager. I can't see why we'd let Lowell take the reins because he's leaving. Dominic Mackay's not even officially in the position yet, so I don't know who's making the decisions. The only logical explanation is, like he says, Howe has agreed in principle, although we can't officially announce him yet. He's still doing some stuff behind the scenes. He's like you mentioned, he's given us a list of some guys that he maybe wants us to approach and see if we can get in. In which case, that's the only explanation to me that makes any sort of sense. The Encham thing though baffles me completely, and like Laura says, from a financial perspective, it just doesn't make any sense because he's still under he's still got a year, right? If you say you suspect that if you're terminating that contract, you're going to have to pay him, and I mean, like you says, only a couple of years ago, we were rejecting bids up like around 15 million for him. We know what he's capable of, and it might also be a case of another guy who, under the right management, we can lift his head again. And even then, you've got, like Laura mentioned, you've got another couple of windows to potentially shift him. I don't want to. I mean, I don't know much about Football Insider as a publication or a news media, but I don't know where they're getting this exclusive for or who they're getting it for. But it just seems like any other sort of shit you read in a paper. It's just.
Well, to be fair to them, like I have seen other journalists and stuff tweeted as well. Purely from
I've only seen other journalists tweet about that. Like there's nobody other than Football Insider broke the news, right?
Yeah,
and then people jumped on it, and then they were like that, like they're saying it's an exclusive, and they're just kind of repeating it, and they're just drumming up. It's just another article. I don't think there's any truth to it. I can't see a logical reason as to why. I think like most sort of news media forums and stuff like that, newspapers are the worst for it. It's just printing stuff for the sake of printing stuff and drumming up conversation. I don't think there's anything in it at all.
Yeah, I had to laugh when I tweeted it, and then Natasha retweeted it, and Laura commented on it going, "I'll have to take this with a pinch of salt." Just brushed it off. That made me laugh.
But to your point as well, Stephen, and this is just to reiterate the point I was making there as well. You put that tweet out, and you were just going after what Football Insider had said, right?
I didn't say I believed it though. So that's
no, but what I'm saying, no, this is what I mean. It's like you've relayed a story that's been printed by or an exclusive by another publication, right? You've then heard this rumour, you've put it up on Twitter, and now you've got French media crediting you for breaking the news. And this is the problem with stuff like that. It's like this is why you can't find truth in a lot of stuff like this. And this is why you take it with a pinch of salt. I don't see any reason why you would believe something like that.
Aye, and the other thing to pick up on that is like I was getting a couple of folk commenting to me like outside of that, sort of saying that you guys obviously have tweeted reliable stuff in the past, which you have, and they were saying, so why wouldn't you believe this? And I was like, it's not that I'm saying that endless Celts are not tweeting what they find to be legit. I said it was Football Insider that I didn't necessarily think was legit. So even people who are presented with the evidence in black and white of like who the source is aren't believing it because they just see your name at the top of the tweet. So anything within they'll attribute to you rather than the publication that you actually did reference in the tweet.
Yeah, and that's why things go viral, because then And that it can happen with anything. And you're exactly right, Laura. It's like Football Insider broke it. Anybody that's then tweeting it is getting taken as, that it must be true then. And that's always not necessarily the case. And this is one of the things that we need to be carefully when you're making sort of comments and you're tweeting about stuff, because it can be picked up and you can then be the one credited for breaking certain news and stuff like that. When, like I says, but yeah, I take it with a pinch of salt myself.
I think Laura's saying it in a roundabout way. There's people who don't trust us. No, no, but
Not sure.
Lies.
No, but coming to yourself, Laura. We spoke about David Turnbull there, and he's been linked with moves already. And fair enough, he's had a fantastic half a season when he's been in the Celtic team. Is there any scenario in your mind that you can see Turnbull leaving? Is it a possibility? For me, anyway, he needs to be a mainstay of that team.
Well, I mean, I had a conversation with Jim and Tony, who I'm on a Celtic State of Mind with on a Friday, and we were actually talking about the fact of, like, you know, James Forrest and Callum McGregor, just to take two similar examples of Scottish players at the club. They've achieved everything basically that they're going to achieve in a Celtic shirt, so you could understand. I mean, I don't think James Forrest will leave until he's carried out in a box, probably. But like Callum McGregor, I could see probably wanting to ply his trade down south or something like that. And if they went, I could kind of understand it more, because, like I say, they've won everything there is to win up here. David Turnbull, I would like to think, has got enough about him to say, you know, I've only just arrived here. I've had a couple of good months after struggling to get into the side at the start of the season. I'm going to try and really establish myself in this team going forward. I think he already has done, but like make himself the mainstay, the heart of the team. Hopefully win a few trophies with us, because the other thing to remember is he's not actually won a trophy with us except the Scottish Cup that was a hangover from last season because of COVID. So you want him to like win some silverware with us, prove his usefulness and his success with us before we look at shipping him on maybe for a bit of money in a few years' time, because I don't see him lasting like a James Forrest or Callum McGregor. He's not that type of player. I don't think I do see him ending up down in England at some point, but I would be heartbroken if he went this summer. I think it's a bit early, and I would like to see him, you know, at least give it another couple of years here, get a chance to play in front of the Celtic fans as well, which is something that he's not done, and just like prove his worth to us before he gets the move that he undoubtedly will in the future, I think.
Yeah. What we're seeing as well was the Eddie Howe thing continues, obviously, but we've seen in terms of Bournemouth, their season did end, and unfortunately they didn't get promoted to the Premier League. They got beat by Brentford. Ivan Toney coming up trumps for us. Maybe that was his job all along. But if you look at this, come to yourself, Francis, and I said it to you in the topics when I sent it out. To my point of view, I think Celtic are playing a very dangerous game in terms of all the eggs in one basket. And you look at David Turnbull, and we don't know if this whole thing could make him unsettled, not knowing who's coming in, because Brown didn't even know. Brown's the captain, the 9 in a row captain, the quadruple treble winning captain. And he even said in his leaving press conference, one of the main reasons was the uncertainty of what's happening next season. And how do we know this whole event and this saga isn't affecting the squad at this present moment, with players linked with moves away, players who want gone? Surely it must be a big factor.
Oh, I agree. As a big factor, I think you've got to admit that the uncertainty will have an impact on players, but you've got to hope that guys like Turnbull, potentially McGregor, I wouldn't say Forrest, because like Laura, I don't ever see James Forrest leaving your eyes on that. You just hope that the people higher up have had what words with these and says, look, this is a guy that's coming in. We just need to wait. There's a waiting game for him to come in, but he's coming in. Just to get guys like that to stay in that. I mean, I appreciate it's a dangerous game trying to hold off, but because the longer with anything, the longer you hold off, there's always a chance that something can happen. But yeah, it can't be good for the players, but you've got to hope that they're a wee bit in the loop as well. But Brown's comments don't really back that statement. Don't really back me up there, do they?
And you would think that Brown would know out of everybody within the playing squad.
No, totally. I think apart from, well, I've said that before, apart from John Kennedy at the time, he should have knew, out of respect to him, for kind of, I wouldn't say stepping up to the task, because he was handed the task at the end of the day, but he should, out of respect to him, be known who the new manager is, if there was going to be one. Then you got your club captain and say, look, this is a guy that's coming in. Do you want to stay under him at the end of the day?
I mean, what's your opinion, John? Because uncertainty in any aspect of life can be unsettling. If the people, for example, people don't know when the next paycheck's coming in, that can be unsettling due to bills and things, and professional life as well if you're in a high-profile job. But in that playing squad, there is young players there who need a hand around them, who need told what's happening next season, who need to be invoked in this plan. They need to be sold this plan, and it is worrying at this early stage of Turnbull's Celtic career, he's being linked with moves away.
Yeah. So, firstly, just regarding the Turnbull thing, it's a load of shite. I think it's just nonsense. We see it
Don't
every year.
Don't contradict yourself here because
listen. We see it every year, right? Anytime somebody has a decent season in a Celtic jersey, they're getting linked away in the papers. It happens every year, year in, year out. Every summer, we see the same stuff, and none ever comes out. James Forrest has been leaving Celtic every year since he started. So
I think James Forrest has only been linked away once, John. To be fair,
yeah.
Nah,
I've seen
he's been reported.
That was about 10 years ago.
Nah, it's been far more regular than that. But the point I'm making is that he's came in, right? Turnbull's had a great half season, as you mentioned, and you're starting to see his name, or clubs are sort of looking at him, and there's been bids or there's projected interest and everything else. I would take it with a pinch of salt because there's nothing. I've been over this countless times, and my opinions and my feelings on the sort of the likes of the Daily Record and the Scottish Sun and other papers and other media that print this pish. It's like every manager as well under the sun's been linked with Celtic since the position became vacant, and it wouldn't surprise me if Yogi's in the paper tomorrow being touted for the Celtic job. Again, it's just talk as far as I'm concerned, and in my personal opinion, I don't believe there is any interest. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there is interest in Turnbull, but I don't think there's anything in it. I don't think there's any weight to it. And Celtic, he's still got another 3 years to run in his contract, and 7 million is seriously undervaluing what he could potentially be. So
I agree.
You keep him at the club for another season, another 2 seasons. You could potentially, if he continues to develop the way he is, play the way he is, has a good showing at the Euros, you could easily get triple that value for him. And I think that we need to stop believing all this nonsense that we read in papers, and especially when English clubs come in and start undervaluing players as well. But no, I firmly agree that all this talk can turn people's heads. It can be unsettling. I understand that, and I agree with that completely as well. And I think I don't think Turnbull's the type of the player that, although a young guy, I don't think it's something he's going to take too much notice in. I think he seems like he's got his head screwed on and he's focused on his career. And I think he just wants to keep developing the way he is.
Yeah, but to be fair, John, as well, most of the rumours we read about Eddie Howe's from the paper, so we can't really say not to take anything what they're saying. That's
Stephen, I'm not getting into this with you again.
Yes, but no, but it's true. I mean, everyone can go back to podcasts and listen to quote things from papers that saying Eddie Howe's been
never,
like,
no.
You've said things. You've said things.
I remember it was a pub one time as well.
Yes, the pub. Yeah. So moving on.
It was tongue in cheek. I was relaying something I was told. And anyway, as I says, I when it comes to things like news, see, unless it's a well-respected, a massive, like Sky Sports News, if they report something, I tend to, they're not in the habit of printing stuff or reporting on stuff if there's nothing in it, right? And they commented on the How to Celtic thing, which instantly gives it more weight than any paper has. And every paper you read differ, the stories differ regarding Eddie Howe's appointment. Some say he's going to be announced this week. Some say he's not getting the job at all. Some say he rejected Crystal Palace. Some say he accepted. He's been approached by Palace.
Right.
Don't cut me off, Stephen.
Moving on from that, because I don't want to keep going down them routes. People do take things from the papers, wherever they're reading it from, and put it into shows, because that's how you make the show, because you need stuff to talk about. But coming to yourself... Coming to yourself, Laura, right? We were speaking previously about players who could be reinvented under a new management team. What players, in your mind, would you like to keep for the rebuild next season? And how do you think a new management team could affect that?
Well, I mean, listen, before we get into that, the only thing I've got to take issue with is the fact that you chose to tell 3 Celtic fans that have just watched Shane Duffy all season that uncertainty breeds unsettlement, because I think we've all experienced that watching Shane Duffy this season. But in terms of keeping players, I mean, I obviously want to keep Turnbull. I think he should be the player around which we build the team. I think I want to see Callum McGregor return to his old self next season, because he's been far from the player that we usually see. I think James Forrest being back in next season, I hate to use that phrase, but he kind of will be like a new signing, because we've missed him so much this season. Fingers crossed they can get through the Euros without any major injuries or anything like that. And the one that I'd really want to see like reinvent himself in a way is the one we talked about earlier, is Barkas. I do think there's a player there. I do think that he can like shore himself up and make his place in the team a bit more concrete, because I think the way that the whole goalkeeper situation was handled this season, and I don't really blame Neil Lennon for this, because I think he was under a lot of pressure himself, but I think he simultaneously managed to like degrade the confidence of Hazard, Bain and Barkas in one fell swoop with the way that he managed them. So hopefully with a manager who can instill a bit more confidence in him next season, Barkas can make the number 1 jersey his own, because we're not a club of the size that can just throw away 5 million on a goalkeeper for it not to work.
I think that's a great point. I mean, me and Francis are big advocates of Barkas. I think there is a player in there. I just believe it's the way he's been coached. And as you said, coming into a country where he has to live in a hotel, he can't socialise, he can't go for drinks, he can't go for lunch. It does play a big factor. Not using that as the excuse for him, but I do think there's a player there. But coming to yourself, Francis, for me, if I obviously I'm angry at the players, but again, retracting from what I said earlier on, I would like to see Greg Taylor go on another level, because I believe he could. I think there's another level in him in terms of his development, crossing balls, that type of thing. Christopher Julian to come back in the team could be another cracking centre back for us. We've all seen him at his best. Barkas go through the team. Christie, if he takes that big massive helmet off and he plays for the team instead of himself. Forrest, we all know what he can produce, but that's where I'm coming from. What about yourself, Francis?
Well, to kind of like to touch on players being rude, it sounds simple, but they all could be if you think if they all put the dedication and hard work in, every one of them could be revived and have a career. But yeah, I agree that I think we need to work on Barkas. I do believe there is something there. I agree with what Laura says. Turnbull, I think we should be building the team around him. I think he's a real talent. I do think there could be more to come for Greg Taylor, or you could potentially get more from him. Like if you could just sort of be more confident in beating him and maybe try and beat him in, or even just create a wee bit of space and work on his crossing, and then he could be a player, because I think he's a solid enough left back, maybe not wing back that we like to play, but yeah, guys, I'm just trying. Julian, even our man Henry, who's over in Belgium, and that,
yes,
you never know. It could be a player. It could. I mean, I say it could be a player. I know it didn't work out for us, but as we touched on a few weeks ago, he actually won Belgian Player of the Season. So there could be something there. Then he's got to be coming under a new manager and stuff as well. So it's just new voices and stuff in the background. It could just work for any player. Just having a different voice, a different coaching style, and obviously you've got to then put it on the players to say, look, we're giving you the tools. It's kind of on you to decide if you want to make it work too.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Julian for me is going to be a big factor next season coming back. I think we've missed him, and people do have their opinion of him. He can be slow and stuff, but he's solid. Him and Ayer had a solid partnership, especially last season, if you know what I mean. But coming to yourself, John, what areas of the pitch do you think could be developed in terms of players, in terms of the personnel? Where do you think that could go under a new management team? Hello, John.
So went on off.
Sorry, no, I forgot to unmute my mic. I was just saying there that, as I said previously, I think that the likes of Eddie Howe can come in and definitely lift heads and lift spirits and motivate players and get them back to playing their best. So ultimately it comes down to who's actually going to be in and around the club at the time. And when it comes in, because like I said, there's still a bit of uncertainty regarding who's going to be there, who's not. But in terms of areas we can strengthen, I think he might be able to bring Taylor up a level, but I still think that the left and right back are definitely positions that we need to focus on primarily going forward.
Yeah.
I think midfield-wise is always a position that we seem to have a good bit of depth in. Although I certainly would, again, you're sort of looking at players coming in. I think we've got some great young guys like Dembele on the right. We've still got Forrest there. You've got Mikey Johnson on the left if he can stay fit, but another backup left-sided player. Another couple of strikers, definitely. But I agree, Julian coming back is going to be huge. If we can keep Ayer, him and Julian could certainly shore up the central defence. You've still got Welsh there, who's made a good account of himself, and again another young player who could potentially brought up another level with good development and man management. So it's a tough question. It really ultimately we need to see where we stand once a manager's signed in the door, and once we're sort of approaching the end of the window, and just to see where we are.
Yeah, it is a tough question, and this next thing is going to be tough, or it's going to be interesting anyway. And I'm going to come to yourself, Francis, first. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I asked you yesterday in the topics, could just pick a best moment of this season. And for me, I can barely think right now, but coming to yourself, Francis, what's been the best moment of this season for yourself as a Celtic supporter?
Right, so I've got away right. So we've got disgraceful European campaign, disgraceful league campaign, a manager calling out players for no one to be around, but then played them in the next fixture. 5 derbies and never registered a win. The carry on with
best moment.
We're getting there. Essentially having 3 number 3s because the way he carried on with the goalkeepers was what I touched on was ridiculous. Losing the league in February, a manager lasting longer than he should have. Bolingoli gone to Spain during a travel ban and no isolating when he came back. The Dubai trip, Duffy, Laxalt, Kenny, no domestic cup run. So you could say the best moment of the season was at finishing. But I'm not going to go with that narrative, Stephen. Because a major
interesting.
No. Because a major achievement happened during this campaign. And for me, my best moment came on the 20th of December at Hampden Park in a delayed cup final because of the pandemic. But it still happened the same year it was meant to happen. And we secured another treble against Hearts that night, or that day. Another treble. I mean, it was madness. And
that was going to be mine.
And it was a quadruple treble at that.
Yeah.
Now, we can argue that, as I say, that competition was from the previous season, but it was delayed, obviously, just for a few months because of the pandemic. But it's an achievement that somehow seems to have been dismissed and almost forgotten about in some quarters within the media and pundits. It's mental, and they've been drilling all over Rangers going a league campaign undefeated, which I agree is some achievement, and it's so much an achievement that the BBC are doing a documentary on it for some reason. But we actually won 12 out of 12 trophies, the first 3 without losing a game. So we actually won a treble without losing a game, not just a league campaign. That's just mental to think about, and to keep up that for over 4 years, or around 4 years, that level of performance, to keep winning and keep turning out performances, and it just to kind of the media to dismiss it is absolutely baffling. And I can only assume that maybe Amazon or something have got to do a documentary on it, because it was that big. It's such a massive achievement, and every player, every manager, every staff member should be proud of that. And because only 6 months ago, and I'm not going to excuse myself for the language I use here, we actually won another fucking treble, a quadruple fucking treble.
Well done, unbelievable. I like that. And you're right when you say that it's been swept away as if it's like nothing, because the team across the city, rightly so, went unbeaten, they won the league, fair enough. But this achievement is massive, Laura. And what's your best moment of the season? Are you following along with Francis there?
Yeah, no, Francis said it, and I think I heard John say that would have been his, and to be honest, it would have been mine, which says a lot about this season. What it says is there wasn't a lot great to look back on. So, and even though that was such a massive achievement, it just stood out so much over above everything else. But to make it a bit more interesting, what I will say is, if I can't have the tying up of the quadruple treble, I'll say that the best moment of the season so far was when Neil Lennon resigned. And the reason I say that is it sounds a harsh thing to say, but I think it's easy to forget with a few months hindsight, like how despondent we felt as Celtic supporters that he was still in the job. And I don't blame the guy individually. Like I think there's a lot of people wouldn't quit until they were forced out the door. If they had the opportunity to be Celtic manager, and I think he probably falls into that category. But I remember feeling the day that I woke up and realised that he had gone, it was like, finally it's happened. Finally we can start to move on from what has become like one of the worst periods I can remember being a Celtic supporter, probably since the Tony Mowbray days. Little did I know that we'd be sitting here like months later, still no further forward. But yeah, on that particular day, I thought, we can put this to bed, and it really, like, although it was a very low point as a Celtic supporter, it was an equally optimistic point where you just thought, right, this is not going well for anybody, Neil Lennon included. We can put it behind us and move on. And I'm hoping that that's certainly what we do next season, even if it hasn't started properly yet.
Well, that's a fair point. I mean, on the day when Neil Lennon resigned, I thought it was a joke. I woke up to all these texts from John, and I was like, no chance. And I put on the TV, and he was away, and I was like, I fuck for that. But again, we haven't moved on any further, and it just points again to the lack of planning the Celtic have. But come to yourself, John. What's your best moment this season? I know you said obviously the quadruple treble, but anything else?
No, I mean there is nothing else. I think Laura made a fair point as well, because I think we always, Celtic fans, or at least the majority of us, when we woke up to that news that Lennon left, I think we did have there was a sort of airy optimism about it, and we thought finally this time we move forward. Granted, that hasn't happened yet, and we're none the wiser. Nothing's particularly got any better either, because nothing's changed. But at the time, I guess it was certainly an upside. But now that, like Francis says, that because I know it was the previous season, but it did happen during this season, and although it wasn't a comfortable result by any means, we still sealed it. So that would be up there for me.
Yeah, my best moment, obviously, Francis touched upon the quadruple treble. Laura, Neil Lennon, you the quadruple treble as well. I'm just going to go for something that we all enjoyed at the time, was the introduction of David Turnbull into the team. I thought when he came into the team, it brought a wee bit of class in the midfield. Calm and Besison scored goals, did some cracking balls through the strikers, overheads and stuff. And I just think he's a fantastic addition to the team, and hopefully he stays for many years to come. But that, guys, is bringing us to the end of the show. And we're going to move on to the quiz between Laura and Francis. Now, there's been a trend recently in these quizzes, Laura. I've went with stadiums, and I'm going to stick with stadiums, okay?
Oh, Jesus.
Okay.
Because I think it could get a bit stale if we're always doing Celtic stuff and Celtic questions, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to keep it stadiums.
It's not still doing 3 straight weeks of stadiums.
Can I just check? Are we is it fastest finger first type thing, or is it like, are we getting asked a question each? How does it work this time?
You just shout out. It's the same format as last time.
Right.
So 5 questions. Whoever here first gets it, and then first to 3 or first to whatever, and then you win. And as you know, the prize is just your pride. So, are you guys ready to get going?
Yeah.
And to be fair, John, I agree with you in the stadiums, because I've just come back in football and I'm thinking I have no quiz wrote down, so I have to go with this, okay? Ease off me, right? So, first question. Who plays at East End Park?
Dunfermline.
Laura won.
Oh.
Who plays at Somerset Park?
Ayr United.
2-0 to Laura. Whoa.
Struggling.
Who plays at Starks Park?
Wraith Rovers.
Wow, 3-0.
I'm away to bed.
Nice,
I'm away to
well
bed.
done.
Not even a hesitation. Laura, have you enjoyed your time on the show?
Jeez, I've just realised a party trick that I didn't know I had. I'll just shout random stadium names out and who the club is, and I didn't even know I had that skill. So thank you for helping me realise that something that I can do at my next get together, my next socially distanced get together.
I think that brings the score now to 5-3, doesn't it? We're still ahead by 2. I'm sure anyway.
I think that's 5-4 now.
It's going to get a wee bit closer, like, because that's 2. I've been beat up, because that obviously Laura and Colin Watt beat me too.
All right, okay, so it's probably 5-4 then. So You can take that back to the guys at Sally said at 9. Thanks for coming.
I'm delighted with that, honestly, because I got absolutely, for want of a better phrase, humped the last time. So I'll take that.
Well,
gladly.
that's me 2-1 against your people as well, because that's Colin Watt and yourself beat me, and I've only beat Declan McConville. So I'm in a losing streak. I'm in a losing streak, kid. It's no good.
Don't talk to me about losing streaks, Francis.
Thanks for coming on, Laura. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you on again soon. And to my co-host John, thank you, and Francis as well. Have you enjoyed it, guys?
Yeah,
Been great.
all
Thanks
good.
very much.
Yep, pleasure as always.
No worries. And the listeners, until we speak again, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.